Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
And good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 16th of May. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information for your part of Alaska. Another great way to do that is using your NOAA weather radio or the Marine Band to get the latest forecast for the region you're in. Current weather observations, of course, when you're online, you can see the latest satellite and radar pictures and check out aviation forecasts, or perhaps you're looking at the marine weather. If you're headed out to port later this weekend, weather looks great in many places, but the weather is changing, so make sure you check in to that weather situation before you go. The weather info line, 800-472-0391. Find each weather service office on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, you've probably seen by now the Alaska Daily Weather Briefing that we put out around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can check that out on YouTube if you haven't yet. Just search for AKWX TV if you'd like to watch the entire show later on. Tonight's hazardous weather includes fire danger across a large part of the central and eastern interior, south central, southwestern Alaska, and even Juneau tonight under red flag warnings. That's what all the red shaded areas indicate. And a fire weather watch now for Kodiak Island. And dry conditions there, as well as wind and low humidity, combined to make that red fire or the red flag warning hoisted on our maps there. So again, the potential for spread and development of wildfire, if it starts, is upon us there for the central and eastern interior, south central, southwest, Kodiak Island, perhaps tomorrow, and again in the Juneau area tonight. So be extraordinarily careful if you are camping and using a campfire. Remember to dump a bunch of water on it, stir it, and then dump a bunch of water on it again. And repeat the process again, just in case. It's just can't be too safe with wildfire this time of the year. Now, from the sort of not so great news to the sort of pretty good news. Breakup's almost over across the large part of the interior. You can see the dark blue, mostly open to entirely open water there along the Yukon and the expanse of the Tanana and the Kuskokwim rivers. We have no flood warnings to pass on to you. There are a few places across the North Slope that might still be in the process of breaking up. Haven't had too many reports there around Colville, but it looks like at least it is some open. And the River Forecast Center is fairly confident that the Noatak River, I believe, is mostly ice to at least some open, maybe all the way open. So if you got a report there from the Kotzebue Sound region, Noatak and Kobuk, pass them on. They'd love to know. And again, yeah, breakup, almost done. How about that? Fire danger, back to that again, anywhere from high to extreme across the south and eastern parts of Alaska. It does not include a large part of southeast, but again, we have a red flag warning right now for Juneau. And fire danger growing around south central, around Matsu and the Kenai Peninsula as we head into the weekend. And the winds are going to come up across a large number of places across southwest, south central, and the interior. So again, we're just kind of ramping up the risk factor for wildfire growth and spread as we head into the weekend. The good news is cooler and slightly wetter air is moving in from the north and west. If you watch carefully here, you can still see we're in a southwesterly flow up around the Bering Strait, but this is a frontal boundary working its way across toward western Alaska later tonight and tomorrow, and western Alaska will be the first place to see some initial cooling changes there. It could include some rain and snow for parts of the North Slope becoming all snow as we head toward the rest of the weekend. Meanwhile, low pressure lurks just south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. It is caught up in more of that southerly stream. The main jet stream right now is located well south of Alaska, and then it splits and goes well north of Alaska. So we're kind of sitting in, well, more of a mid-spring doldrum, I guess, where no major weather patterns really interrupting the flow. And so a large part of Alaska is just sitting on slow roast, spring style. It's not terribly hot, but sure is mild for this time of the year. Southeast enjoying a lot of sun and heat today. South Central, a lot of sun and heat. Most of the interior, sun and heat. And some scattered clouds working through there. Might have been a shower or two. It looked like there's at least something showing up on the radar north and east of Fairbanks earlier today. South of Kodiak, though, a considerable amount of fog. You saw a lot of it yesterday just roll in from the east to west, and more of the same today, just kind of grazing the coast by and large, but certainly present there. And across the southern Bering, all the way out through central and western sections of the Aleutians. And once again, one of my favorite things, if you watch the show for a while now, you know I like to point out these lines. Those are ship tracks. That is the mark we leave on the surface of the ocean in very stable conditions like this, very much like contrails going through the atmosphere there. So it'll go away as soon as the wind shifts and the moisture is kind of evaporated there and mixes up a little bit more, but it's a sign of very stable air. And again, low clouds and stratus out there across the Bering. I like to refer to that as the fog monster. The fog monster is surely intact across the Bering today. Out across the west, you can see clouds are building in. Speaking of fog monster, if you haven't looked lately around Nome, last I checked, Nome Airport was not seeing a lot of visibility. In fact, not seeing very much. Visibility was way down there, and for a time at least, the Nome Airport might have been closed. So if you got travel going in and out of Nome in the next several hours, you might want to check on that as well. Up north, the frontal boundary north of the Arctic coast, sitting there holding back at least some of the colder air. You can see a little bit of a light rain there around Point Hope up toward Point Lay. High pressure just almost right on top of the Pribilofs, 1,033 millibars there. Not a lot of precipitation under that. Surely there's some mist and drizzle there. Low pressure well south and west of Haida Gwaii, and that's drawing in the air across south central today. Otherwise, a fairly beautiful day. The breeze is not terribly strong in most cases. By tonight, though, things begin to change a little bit. Colder air moving off of eastern Asia clears the Gulf of Anadyr. With that, it starts to latch onto at least a little bit of the moisture around the Chukchi Sea coast. Into Kotzebue Sound and into the Seward Peninsula comes a chance for at least some rain. Probably some rain and snow the farther north you go toward Kivalina and Kotzebue, maybe even Shishmaref. And once you get up toward Wainwright and Ambler, you're probably looking at least some snow mixing in with that rain, perhaps becoming all snow by tomorrow morning. Here you go. By Saturday afternoon, the frontal boundary now is working into the Yukon Valley. Coming up on the western parts of the Alaska Range, we'll have some showers across southern parts of southeast. That's a slightly different system there. But for most of south central and southwestern Alaska, still looks like a pretty pleasant day. If you're making that last minute run down the Cook Inlet out toward Kodiak Island, perhaps a little bit of fishing inside Prince William Sound, conditions look pretty nice, so the wind shouldn't be too terrible just yet. As you get up across the upper Yukon Valley, you may start to see a few showers. There could be a little bit more of a convective growth here out across the central parts of the Yukon. We'll just see how that shapes up tomorrow. Hopefully not a whole lot considering the dry conditions. And up across the Arctic coast, snow will continue with more of an onshore flow for the Chukchi Sea coast from Barrow all the way down toward Point Hope, Point Lay, and probably Kivalina. And you'll notice most of Kotzebue Sound is dealing with more of a northwesterly flow at this point too. What about high pressure across the southern Bering? It's still locked in place, and that fog monster is not going to give it up just yet. You'll notice areas of light rain and mist, probably hunkering down right over Adak and Atka and Shemya. And the farther west you go, you're still into a pretty deep southerly flow here. So if you're working out in the western Bering, you'll notice that warm and wet air still spreading north, and it comes back pretty hard as you get into Sunday. High pressure hasn't budged. It may have weakened just a little bit, but look, the cold air is moving around it. That high pressure system's going nowhere, and as it drops southward, here comes cooler weather for places like King Salmon and Dillingham, all the way down toward Pilot Point and Port Hayden. You're going to get a shift in the wind, and that's also going to release, or at least relieve, let's say, some of that fire danger. It may not completely go away, but it should ease it somewhat. So that's good news for the YK Delta, Norton Sound, Unalakleet, and areas into central and eastern parts of the interior. Probably looking at more clouds and a few more showers throughout the day, and out around Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and maybe you still westward out toward Barrow occasionally. Around the Brooks Range and Anaktuvik Pass, snow will be likely as we get into Sunday. The cold front itself working south of Northway and Eagle and heading out toward Yakutat. This will eventually work its way into the eastern coast as it kind of reforms a little bit, but expect some gustier winds at times, maybe through some of the passes in south central as that frontal boundary works away down into the north and western Gulf and out over Kodiak Island as well. Again, with the wind tomorrow, that's why the Fire Weather Watch has been hosted for the Kodiak Island area. Now, temps today, probably not the temps we're going to see on Sunday. So hopefully you enjoy today. If not, enjoy tomorrow just in case. 60s and 70s across southeast. Juneau today in the lower 70s. Sitka 66. Ketchikan and Net. Many places there just enjoying a beautiful day. 46 out in Middleton Island. The birds enjoyed that one today. Most of the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound at least in the upper 50s like Valdez, mid-60s for everyone else. 68 in Kenai, 69 in Talkeetna. Palmer and Wasilla also toasty today. Low to mid-60s around Healy and Greeley, and 63 in Fairbanks. Tanana 59 degrees. Fort Yukon looks at 61 late this afternoon, 65 in Eagle. Heading up the road a little bit more toward Anaktuvuk Pass, it was 39. Ambler and Bettles in the 40s and 50s, already sealing some cooler weather out there across the west. It looks like the Arctic coast hovering in the lower 30s today. A few places like Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse and Kaktovik made it up above freezing. 31 around Barrow. Kotzebue Sound in the low to mid 30s. Shishmaref 37, 34 in Nome, again with plenty of fog. 36 around St. Lawrence Island. The YK Delta generally in the 40s and 50s. Bethel, the farther inland you went, the temps really soared. Bethel was 56. McGrath was 64. And around King Salmon, Dillingham, Lake Iliamna, mid to upper 70s. 77 degrees around Lake Iliamna today. Goodness sakes, it's warm. And for Bristol Bay and farther southward, temperatures started to cool off. Again, the effects of that cooler high pressure and that deep layer of stratus and fog, well, certainly evident there. 30s and 40s for the Pribilofs, the lower 40s from Shemya all the way out toward Adak, Atka, and Dutch Harbor at 44. Sandpoint, though, 55, a little bit more of a clear sky for you. Tonight's temperatures will be mild across southwest and Bristol Bay. South of the Yukon, temps could reach into the 50s in places like Dillingham. Bethel, 44. The interior, upper 30s and lower 40s. Southeast, low to mid 40s. Some places, especially near the coast and the Dixon entrance, closer to 50 degrees. The Arctic coast, looking at mid 20s. Nome, 33. Not much of a change for you. 44 in Fairbanks and mid 40s for Anchorage, with temperatures in Kodiak tomorrow up to 67. Southeast, upper 60s and low 70s tomorrow. And places like Juneau again, pretty mild. 59 around Sitka, low 60s the further south you go. Mid 40s for the Chain, 40 in St. Paul, 37 in Nunivak Island, just a little bit cooler around St. Lawrence. Norton Sound in the low to mid 40s, Nome 42, and mid 60s again for the interior with Talkeetna back at 70 degrees. Flying weather shows a widespread area of IFR across the Arctic coast and some places around the Brooks Range in the south. But again, with that fog monster in the Bering Sea, you've got a wide swath of IFR from St. Matthew to Nunivak Island to the Pribilofs into the central and western chain, with southeast looking at least MVFR south of Sitka and into Haida Gwaii. Past conditions will change in the Brooks Range, but that's about it. Anaktuvuk expected to go over to IFR. Same goes for Adigan Pass throughout the day with that colder air moving in and precipitation beginning. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass as well as Rainy Pass should both be VFR. Windy Pass and Rainy Pass and Isabel Pass should all be visual flight rule throughout the day. Some changes probably coming on Sunday and Monday for Mentasta, not just yet for Saturday though. Tenita Pass expected to be VFR, Portage should be just fine, and Chilkoot and White Pass at this point also VFR. The freezing levels are kind of spreading out a little bit as the weather's changing. You'll notice a 2, 4, 6, 8,000 foot freezing line north of the YK Delta. The surface freezing line hasn't changed just yet. We're going to see a big change as we get into Sunday though. Look at some of that warmer air you see around Bristol Bay with 8,000 foot freezing lines out over the Gulf of Alaska. For the icing potential, generally below 12,000 feet and above 6,000 feet. We'll run into some light, maybe isolated, moderate, closer to the frontal boundary itself for your Saturday. The jet stream potential shows a pretty odd pattern. High pressure out across the south and western parts of the Bering, latching onto that main jet flow, pushing that into Alaska, and then dropping that southward quickly as low pressure sits from the Pacific Northwest and out over the North Pacific. So this will be changing a little bit as more of that colder air starts to move our way. Generally speaking, a north and westerly flow is taking over the state, though, from northwest to southeast as we go into the weekend. At 9,000 feet, we have 25, 35 knot winds there coming in over the Seward Peninsula and into the central part of our state. Low pressure south of the Dixon entrance, moving in more winds kind of offshore from Yakutat all the way down toward Annette and Ketchikan. Those are only about 15 to 20 knots, with winds also spreading out and away from high pressure, as they always do, moving in from about 15 to 30 knots or so around that central area of high pressure. At 3,000 feet, the winds really don't change direction a whole lot. Still looking at more of a northwesterly flow coming in from the Chukchi Seacoast, 15 to 25 knots there. Low pressure south and west of Haida Gwaii, still working some wetter air up in through the Dixon entrance at times, so you'll probably see a few more clouds there. Winds are otherwise light around Yakutat and coming out of Yukon and the Copper River Basin. High pressure sitting right over the Adak and Atka, still blowing winds across the Alaska Peninsula, about 10 to 15 knots or so. A little bit more of a westerly flow coming into Nunivak Island and places like Imanik and Unalakleet, looking at a northwest wind at 20 knots, and a much stronger southerly flow out across the western Bering. That's going about 40 to 50 knots at this time. Tomorrow's turbulence then will really focus on where that frontal boundary is, and since that's moving from northwest to south and east, you can expect at least some potential for some light to isolated moderate turbulence along that boundary, anywhere from the Arctic coast around 6,000 feet and below to out around St. Matthew and the Pribilofs and westward toward Shemya, and probably even west from that. So again, some light to isolated moderate chops possible there. Around Kodiak Island and south, also with perhaps some stronger winds and a kind of a lee side trough of low pressure setting up as winds are moving off the continent. Expect some rough and tumble weather there as far as maybe a little bit of chop goes. Otherwise, no major issue for turbulence is expected at this time. And again, south central, southeast, and probably southwestern Alaska, the weather's changing, so if you got to do some flying, tomorrow's probably a better day to do it. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather and a glimpse at the ice edge here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening we want to welcome back Dr. Earl Wehner. Dr. Wehner is one of 5 members of the National Transportation Safety Board. He was on our program last week and talking about some very interesting topics, but we ended with the promise that tonight we would talk about angle of attack and angle of attack indicators, something I think that is going to be more and more important in general aviation. Dr. Wehner, welcome back.
Thank you, Harry.
So I'm just let you talk about AOA, maybe educate our audience a little bit.
Well, that's a great subject. When we look through the accidents that we have with general aviation aircraft, loss of control shows up as the most frequent accident type. Loss of control, generally a stall followed by a spin with inadequate room to recover from the spin. And we have an activity called the Joint Steering Committee, which is a government and industry committee. It involves the FAA, NTSB, NASA on the government side. It involves general aviation manufacturers, AOPA, the user groups on the others, as the other part of the industry side. This is patterned after a very successful activity called CAS, Commercial Aviation Safety Team, which has really been responsible for an 80% decrease in the accident rate in the U.S. in airlines operations over the last decade or so. So we're using that same kind of methodology to look at general aviation accidents. Loss of control is our single biggest accident category, as I said. When we decided to start with that in this Joint Steering Committee, we identified 28 different safety enhancements that would address loss of control. Very important in that was angle of attack information. Angle of attack information has been a staple in military aircraft for decades. But in the general aviation aircraft, we've used a surrogate, basically airspeed. But airspeed is a poor surrogate for angle of attack. The wing only knows angle of attack in terms of its generating lift. So if you can show that directly to the pilot, he then can do a much better job of finding the right approach airspeed, because he will not be shooting for a particular airspeed, he'll be shooting for a particular angle of attack. So again, the wing only knows angle of attack. The wing only knows maximum lift coefficient or stall, and that's when you pull back more and the ground keeps getting closer. So the emphasis on angle of attack, I think, is going to make a big difference if we can get that into the fleet. Now, getting it into the fleet is a challenge, and it's been more of a challenge in the past because angle of attack systems for certified aircraft have been quite expensive, but they've been relatively inexpensive for experimental aircraft, the same kind of system. So as part of the Joint Steering Committee, the FAA Small Airplane Directorate is represented, and the director of the Small Airplane Directorate is a very enthusiastic general aviation pilot, and he took it upon himself to address the FAA's policy for adding safety equipment. In the past, adding safety equipment to a certified airplane was a difficult thing to do in many cases because it had to be recertified as part of the basic equipment on the airplane. The policy that he has come up with, and it has worked its way through the FAA now, is if the airplane was certified to begin with, if we're adding a piece of safety equipment, it doesn't necessarily have to go through the same certification process as it would have to if it were added to that airplane as a certified piece of gear. So the airplane was okay, was safe without it, it'll be safer with it, and then this system, like the angle of attack system, as long as it's manufactured according to ASTM standards, can be added to the airplane as a minor mod. It doesn't have to go through the full certification as it would have had to in the past.
Dr. Weiner, thank you for that explanation. Thanks for your work on this. And it's, I think we have an education challenge now to do exactly what you've done, and that is explain to our pilots what angle of attack can bring, and also the efforts with the FAA are really appreciated. Thank you for being on the program tonight, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, very quickly, I've used AOA my whole flying career, and if you think about when you have to make decisions based on changing airspeed because of weight, with an angle of attack indicator, you don't have to go through that drill. So you lose an engine, you want to fly best glide, you want to fly angle of attack, you don't have to worry about what your weight is. It's very simple. It's a wonderful device, and as we move into this, I think you'll agree with me it has a place in general aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed these 2 sessions with Dr. Weiner. It's a real pleasure to have him on the program. And until we meet again, fly safe.
Thank you, Harry, and have a great weekend. Here's a look at the sea ice edge now, and you'll notice things are still changing, though the rate of change may slow down just a little bit with some of the cooler air working in across the Bering Strait and into the north and western part of our state as we go into the weekend, and what's to come with that, more of a northwesterly flow. However, that being said, most of this week has been spent chewing away at the ice edge across Norton Sound and north of St. Matthew and Nunivak Island there and along the YK Delta. Once again, we were talking about on Wednesday, a lot of the shore-fast ice there in Norton Sound is rotting in place and becoming unstable, so probably still a good idea to stay off of that around Norton Sound and probably up toward Seward Peninsula too. So keep an eye on that. The latest musings and goings on at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. You can get the sea ice outlook there, as well as the current conditions and the write-up of what you see on this map here and the shape files to make your own map if you'd like to plot that for your own needs. Here's Saturday's marine forecast now in southeast. No ice to speak of and a beautiful day again for Saturday. Northerly flow coming down the Lynn Canal there, more of a southwesterly flow around Stevens Passage, 15 knots with light winds and seas, 10-knot winds from the south and east with a 2-foot sea around Ketchikan and Metlakatla. More of an easterly flow off of Craig at 15 knots, southeasterly south of Sitka, and more of a variable flow becoming a little more northeasterly as you move north from Gustavus up toward Yakutat, about 5-foot seas along the coast, becoming 4-foot seas as we get into Sunday. More of a southerly flow developing from Craig and up the coastline toward Yakutat at 20 knots and 15-knot winds on the inside with 3-foot seas up and down the inner waterways on Sunday in southeast. For south central, you're still looking at more of a north and northwesterly flow on Saturday. Winds will be light around Prince William Sound and outside. The northwesterly flow coming across the Barren Islands means 4 to 5-foot seas there. West to northwesterly winds over Kodiak Island, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea on Saturday. Becoming stronger on Sunday. In fact, across the Barren Islands, you'll probably see much stronger winds. A northwesterly flow ramping up to 35, even 40 knots there with 10 to 11-foot seas on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. Northerlies continue on the Cook Inlet, 3-foot seas there. Northerlies inside Prince William Sound, still looking at 2-foot seas on Sunday. That'll probably change into Monday. And northeasterlies also blowing outside of Prince William Sound into Resurrection Bay, where those turn a little bit more to the north and west. Along the Alaska Peninsula, westerlies inside Bristol Bay up to 25 knots with a 6-foot sea there, 4 to 6-foot seas on the Pacific side at 20 knots on Saturday. On Sunday, the winds and seas diminish somewhat inside Bristol Bay down to 25 knots, 25 to 30 knots though on the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula. 6 to 8 foot seas developing there on the Pacific side for Sunday. Across the Aleutians, a north and easterly flow for the central and eastern chain, 15 to 20 knots, more of a variable flow around Kiska, and then the winds pick up again around Shemya up to 20 knots with a 6-foot sea by Sunday. Southeasterlies around Kiska now with seas around 7 feet, a north and easterly flow on either side of the central and eastern chain, 15 to 20 knots or so, with some of the higher seas there south of Nikolsky and Unalaska and Adak and Atka for Sunday. For the west coast, a westerly onshore push coming from St. Matthew to Nunivak Island up towards St. Lawrence, 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 5 foot seas from Kuskokwim Bay out toward the Pribilofs, a 15-knot wind there. That becomes a little more variable and light as we head into Sunday, as high pressure still holding ground here, but it's losing the battle to that colder air working in from the west and northwest, and you can see a northwesterly flow zipping down through the capes of southwest Alaska. A 7-foot sea expected there outside of the Kuskokwim Bay and south of Makoriak with a 25-knot wind. Across the Arctic coast, you're looking at an onshore push from Kivalina, Cape Lisburn, Point Ley, and then Barrow. The winds turn a little bit more to the north and east. That's that colder air coming in. 20 to 25 knots, more of a southerly warmer flow coming off land from Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse to Kaktovik. And then Sunday, the colder air is now working its way across, 15 to 20 knots there. Stronger winds, though, north of Kaktovik up to 30 knots by the end of the weekend. So again, some changes, especially in the north and northwestern coastlines going through our weekend. Recapping the weather, and you'll see why those changes are happening. Up around northwestern Alaska, snow and rain and snow mixed across the Seward Peninsula and into Norton Sound. Beginning as early as tonight, as a cold front is moving off of eastern Asia and sweeping into our state throughout the day on Saturday. This is about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Most south central, southwestern Alaska will be dry. Clouds pick up in the interior. Probably some showers across the central and eastern interior. We'll watch and see if any of those grow to anything larger at this point. A few areas of light rain across southern parts of southeast, and the fog monster continues in the southern bearing. By Sunday, colder air is sweeping across west and southwestern Alaska, and that should help to diminish the fire weather risk across many parts of the state, at least temporarily. The colder air will make its way into the eastern part of the state, with snow developing again across the Arctic coast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.